Now, how many of you just kind of freaked out? Most? Yeah? Believe it or not, I'm 4 for 4 on that. Fourth service, fourth time that everybody has been like, is he coming on stage? Or why? Because we don't like awkward. And that was kind of weird. That was a little uncomfortable, right? We expect coming into church that the second we walk in, from the moment we start the service to the moment we end, we need to be receiving. Right? We need to be soaking up whatever is coming at me from the stage. And if there's a moment where, oh my gosh, there's nothing going on, we kind of feel uncomfortable for a minute, right? And it's a little awkward. We're wrapping up our series this week called New You. And if you haven't been with us over the past several weeks, I want to encourage you to dive back in on tc3.org. You can go watch the messages over the past few weeks because it really has been a powerful, powerful series with a lot of really good challenges and convictions. And we've had some good conversations with some of y'all who have come up to us like, okay, that was for me, needed to hear that I needed to forgive or whatever it might have been. And we have walked through some pretty awesome territory over the past few weeks, and we're going to wrap that up here today. And I want to just warn you, tonight is going to look a little bit different in that this is more of a conversation. I know often we come into church and we're like, all right, I got my bullet points ready. I've got my passages of scripture ready to rock and roll. But I kind of want to just have a conversation about a topic tonight with you. So kind of let your guard down a little bit. This is a little bit of a lighthearted topic, I guess, if you can call it that. But we're going to be talking about something that I would say is probably the most uncommon spiritual discipline in the Christian faith. Probably the one that most of us don't do on a regular basis, something we don't practice on a regular basis. Solitude. Solitude. Now, when I said that, most of us probably think of it in a negative sense, right? Solitude, oftentimes we think of as negative. It's like prison, right? We think of prison when we think of solitude, or like punishment, or solitary confinement, and you are being punished, so you are put off into a corner and you're not allowed to talk to anybody. We look at it in a negative light. If you're my 3-year-old son, he views solitude as like literally, and I'm not exaggerating, literally as like the equivalent to hell on earth. He does, because he's constantly needing to be engaged. He is like a tornado of a 3-year-old, but if you put him in timeout and you close the door, totally different ball game. You have now crossed a line, Dad, and you are going to hear me roar. Literally. Because we don't like solitude. Even from a young age, we don't like solitude, and we think of it in a negative light. But believe it or not, what's interesting is Jesus doesn't view solitude in the same light and from the same perspective that we do. Instead, he viewed it as a space for replenishment. He viewed it and used it as a space to refill. And we see that in multiple areas in the text of Scripture, and we'll dive into one of those here this evening. But I want to ask you a question, something maybe you have or haven't ever thought about this, but have you ever considered the fact that the path to external success and internal emptiness can actually be the same road? The path to external success being the corporate ladder that we have to climb. We have to gain the promotions. We have to increase our income. We have to continue to accumulate stuff in order to equate that to success. We have to have more. That's how we quantify it in today's day and age. The external success of your life is imperative. We're conditioned to believe that from a young age, but have you ever considered or thought about the fact that oftentimes that path to external success is also paired with the road to internal emptiness? There you go. Internal emptiness. And here's the reality for us today. You and I are in a war between two worlds. We are in a war between two worlds. We're in a war between the inner man or woman versus the external world around us. Okay, the internal man, the inner man or the inner woman is conditioned and structured. God designed it to be filled by Him. It's that desire that you have at the core of who you are to be connected with God. The desire to be filled. The desire for reflection, the desire for quiet, the desire for depth, a place and a space that isn't hurried. At the core of who you are, you actually desire that. Now, it might be covered up by a lot of things, but at the core of who you are, you know that there's a void that you want to have filled. But that inner man and woman is at odds with the external world around us. And this external world is probably one that you participate in a daily and regular basis. Right? It's this world that holds the instant mentality. Right? Or some of you might call it like the microwave mentality. I've got to have it now. It's like, are you kidding me? I got to wait an extra 30 seconds to finish my Hot Pocket? Like, don't judge me. These things are delicious, okay? But you mean I can't have it now? Like, I want it now. I don't want to wait till next week. I don't want to save to get there. I don't want to work for it to get to the reward that's at the end of the tunnel. I want it now. And that's the world that we live in. It holds the busyness. It holds the items that fill up our schedule. It's noisy, it's fragmented, it's fast, and without fail, it's shallow. Every time, it's shallow. And these two desires are at war within your spirit every single day. And you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And as I'm describing this, literally your bones are quivering with confirmation because you're like, yep, yeah, I know what he's talking about. Yeah, that's me. You are at war. But what's awesome is God actually talks to this battle that goes on, the internal versus external battle. He talks about this several times, but one place in particular that we often glaze over and we think it's a pretty verse and we want to cross-stitch it, put it on our fridge and call it a day, like makes us feel good. But we rarely take it outside of the walls of church. And it's Psalm 46:10. It says, "Be still and know that I'm God." Be still and know that I'm God. Can we just sit in that for a minute? Be still and know that I'm God. Listen, we're talking about a God, and I just imagine God this way, but we're talking about a God who's constantly got somebody knocking on his door, asking for something, needing something, praying for a miracle or needing whatever it is to be healed, or constantly needs that he feels like he's having to meet. And if it were me, you talk about overwhelming, but the reality is God is looking at you and I in the midst of the chaos around us, and he's just going, shh. Will you just be with me for a minute? Don't worry about everything else going on. I just want you to be. Rhett, my 3-year-old, he just recently got a big boy bed. And so it's like a little twin bed that he's so proud of. And so our nighttime routines have kind of changed up a little bit. He used to have like a crib, like most babies do or kids do. And but our nighttime routines changed up a little bit because now there's room in the bed for mom or dad to lay down. And if you have kids, you probably had that point where they're moved up to the toddler bed or the big boy bed or whatever, and they asked you, "Mommy, Daddy, will you lay with me?" And for Rhett, I kid you not, like he is a whirlwind at all times. All boy, has more energy than anything I've ever seen in my life. Awesome child, but it's in those moments where he just wants to be. And he asked his mom, Mommy, will you just lay with me? He's not asking to have a conversation. He's just wanting to be in the safety of your presence, of my presence. And I just imagine God that way, looking at you and I and saying, I know what's good for you. Will you just lay with me for a minute? Will you just sit still for just a minute so that you can be with me? I'm the one that's going to replenish you. Now, believe it or not, this busyness, this external world has been around for a long time. It's nothing new. In fact, we read a little bit about it in Job chapter 3. Job has kind of been, his world is kind of falling in this chaotic, blazing fire, and everything around him is basically falling apart. And he's finding himself in this battle of the internal versus external world. And he's like, what am I supposed to do? And in Job chapter 3, verse 26, this is what he says. He says, I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest, but only turmoil. I have no peace, no quietness, no rest, only turmoil. And many of us can probably relate to that. We have so much going on in our world that we can relate to I just need some peace and quiet. I have no rest. I just need an opportunity to just rest. And the reality is we have allowed the busyness of the day to cloud out the voice of the Lord that is saying, shh, just be still with me. Gordon had us had the staff read a book this past year called Replenish. It's by a guy, by an author by the name of Lance Witt. Awesome, awesome book. It's specifically on soul care, replenishing the soul, solitude, those types of things. There was a quote in this book that I absolutely love, and this is what he said. He said, intuitively, we know it's important to spend time alone with God. But experientially, time alone with God is elusive. I'm going to read that again. Intuitively, we know it's important to spend time alone with God. But experientially, time alone with God is elusive. We know in our head and in our hearts what we're supposed to do. Because your heart desires to be with God. But oftentimes, we're so distracted, we get spiritual ADD, if you will, on to the next thing that seems more entertaining than sitting down and spending time with God. And it's hard to be quiet and silent. We want to hear his voice, but the world is full of so much noise that we miss the gentle nudges of God. And the flurry of activity, or for some of us, the downpour of activity in our lives drowns out his voice, and it leads us to something. It leads us to disconnection. We feel disconnected. We feel disconnected from God. We feel disconnected from others, disconnected from joy, disconnected from our purpose in life. And then we stand before God and others and say, I am just missing something here. I'm missing something. Because you know what's interesting? We can have everything. I mean, we can have everything. We've got the car. We've got the boat. We got the house on the water with the infinity pool, so the water never ends. It's awesome. We've got everything. I mean, we couldn't even ask for them. Maybe even just a great, great family. And hear me, those things on their own, there's nothing wrong with those things alone. But those things will never sustain you because we still have nothing of substance. We have nothing of substance. And oftentimes we find ourselves in this place of, okay, now I've accumulated everything. And by the way, a study was done in the past several years that if you make $30,000 a year annually, if you make $30,000, you are in the top 1% of the world. Of the world. So if you felt like you came in here tonight, you're like, I don't really have that much. Yeah, you do. You're rich. But we still have nothing of substance. And we stand in that where we've got everything, and yet we still do what? Well, I just don't really have time to gain any substance. My work is crazy. I got, stuff going on. My kids, it's crazy. They got sports, school. It's just, my schedule, it's just, we blame it away. We blame it away constantly, finding the next thing that we can point the finger to instead of taking the ownership and saying, it's on me. Because the hard truth is our lack of solitude is a result of the choices that we make. I think I've said this to you before. Show me your schedule and I'll show you your priorities. And I'm not exempt from that. Please hear me. I am not exempt from that. But our lack of solitude is a result of the choices we make. And let's be real for a minute. We don't love just dead time where there's nothing going on. The 30 seconds before I stepped right here on this part of the stage was awkward because we don't like this dead space. We don't like the uncomfortable space where there's nothing going on. And we are conditioned by the external world to fill in everything with something. And I'll be honest, this is a confession moment for me for just a minute. Okay, because this is a tough one, because I honestly struggle with this hardcore. I am a project guy. I've got to have something going on. If there's nothing at work for me to do, I've got something going on in my house, some kind of project, home improvement project, or like fixer-upper, I'm Chip Gaines kind of thing. Like I gotta have something going on, right? And if it's not anything like that, guess what? This right here. Don't judge me. You're the same. And you slightly giggled because you're like, oh, dang it, he's talking to me. Our phones. It fills in every moment of our life. We allow it to, right? We all do it. Cell phones while we wait. Cell phones while we drive. During commercials, because they're boring. I don't know. But during commercials, while we work, we check emails constantly. We turn on our push notifications. I mean, it's constant. I had a buddy this past week that was like, hey, man, there's this cool new app. I'm really interested in astronomy. And there was an app that you can download, and you probably have heard of it, that you can like point at the stars, and it shows you at night. You can point at the stars. It shows you like the constellations, the planets you're looking at, satellites, all that kind of stuff. That's awesome. You know what the problem is? At 5 o'clock every single day, I get a notification on my phone that Neptune is rising. Like, I don't care. I don't care if Neptune's rising. I got plenty of stuff going on. But we're constantly being berated by notifications and thoughts and opinions. And some of us, even in our quiet time, we use our computer or our phone or our tablets for our YouVersion app and our Bible, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're anything like me, what happens is I sit there and I'm having a great time in the Word. It's great. Lord's really just, we're communicating well, open path, I'm doing good. And then all of a sudden I get a notification, Des Bryant towards his Achilles, and I'm like, oh, my fantasy team's done. I'm done. And then I'm totally lost. And I know that you're the same way because you get those notifications while you're reading it and we're like, I'm totally distracted now. Because we are constantly being berated by this external world that is trying to just grab your attention, and flat out, we lack the discipline to create the space for soul care. Keyword, discipline. But Jesus gave us a pretty awesome example of kind of putting aside his schedule and his exhaustion for a moment to be in solitude. And we read about it in Mark chapter 1. If you have your Bibles, I want you to turn there. If it's on your phone, that's great. Don't get distracted. But I want you to have it right there in your face. So grab that out for me. Mark chapter 1, verse 29. And leave your Bible open for a minute because we're going to flip over to Matthew chapter 11 here in a few seconds as well. But Mark chapter 1, verse 29, it says this. After Jesus left the synagogue with James and John, they went to Simon and Andrew's home. Now Simon's mother-in-law was sick in bed with a high fever. They told Jesus about her right away, so he went to her bedside, took her by the hand, and helped her sit up. Then the fever left, and she prepared a meal for them. That evening, after sunset, many sick and demon-possessed people were brought to Jesus. The whole town gathered at the door to watch. So Jesus healed many people who were sick with various diseases, and he cast out many demons. But because the demons knew who he was, he did not allow them to speak. Go on to verse 35. Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Later, Simon and the others went out to find him, and when they found him, they said, "Everyone is looking for you." Before daybreak the next morning, Jesus got up and went out to an isolated place to pray. Now, this is probably where I lost some of you. I did earlier, I promise you that, because people are like, I'm not a morning person. I'm just not. It's an ongoing argument in my home with my wife, because she's like, I'm not a morning person, babe, sorry. I'm like, no, that's an excuse. I'm sorry, but when Jesus looks you in the eyes, he's not going to say, oh, Karen, it's okay, you're not a morning person. He ain't going to do that. He's looking at you in the eye and he's saying, you are my son. You are my daughter. I am the place that you are filled up, not sleep. There's nothing wrong with sleep. I created you to sleep, but I am the place that you will be fulfilled in. I am the place where you will find replenishment. Come and be with me. Sacrifice everything else, because if you are weak and weary and you need rest, I'm the place that you're going to find it. Not in your bed, not on the couch, in me. We have got to stop excusing away sacrifice and discipline in our lives. Because I don't know if you notice this, but verses 29 through 34, Jesus kind of had a hectic day here. He was healing people, and if you notice, it said after the sun went down, after sunset, in the evening, people were still bringing people to him to heal. It was probably a late night for Jesus. But he still, regardless of his rest, got up the next morning before sunset because he understood his source of replenishment was in solitude and alone time with God. He understood that. And he said, I can't miss this time. It's too important. Listen, I know that our lives don't have just infinite capacity. And I'm not trying to say that it should or that it does. I'm just simply saying solitude creates capacity for God. So quiet the noise and the chaos for a minute. Because every soul needs to find rest and be replenished in him. Now, this is the point if you're like me. I'm like, okay, Aaron, I'm bought in. I hear you. It's great. I understand it. Yeah. But what does this mean exactly? What does this look like in a practical sense on a day-to-day basis? What does this look like for me? So I want to give you just kind of a couple of statements, if you will, that might help you frame up what this moment of solitude or this time of solitude that I'm going to encourage you in a few minutes to do this week. I want to kind of give you some parameters of what that looks like. Okay, so this is it. Solitude is being present when we're used to being productive. Being present when we're used to being productive. What do I mean by that? I mean, and I'm guilty of this, I mean that in those moments, you're not worried about moving forward in your Bible. You're not worried about praying so that something can be accomplished and now moving forward. You are simply present before God. Does that make sense? I mean, so often I can sit down personally and I'm reading my Bible and my goal is, yes, to take away what God has for me in this passage of Scripture, but it's also to say, sweet, I'm done. I'm now a little bit further in my reading today. I'm good. And I'm more worried about productivity than I am about being in the presence of God. I think a lot of us probably do that because we think if we're not moving forward, we're moving backwards. And to a degree, that's accurate. But in this moment, in this time of solitude, it is so much more important for you just to be present. So solitude is being present when we're used to being productive. Solitude is listening when we're used to talking. Now, this is a hard one for some of us. Because when things are silent, we feel the need to interject our words. We feel the need to fill the gap in awkward silence. Or if it's uncomfortable, we have to throw out our words into the moment, thinking that it's either going to heal, help, or make it less awkward. And if there's nobody around to listen to us, we go to Facebook to start typing out our opinions so that someone will hear us. But God is not this, God is a wonderful counselor, yes, but he's not the type of counselor that's just going to sit back and let you sit on the couch and say, okay, Bill, how does that make you feel? He cares about how it makes you feel, but he also wants you to sit back and be quiet and listen to what he has to say to you. And this is a hard one, I'll be honest, because for me personally, I feel like when I sit before God in this moment of solitude, I need to be praying to him. I need to be saying things where my heart is at. And while he wants you to share where you're at and process through things, he also wants you to be quiet and listen to what he has to say. So solitude is listening when we're used to talking. Solitude is quiet when we're used to noise. For me, I like to have music going on when I'm doing like my quiet time with the Lord in the morning or whatever you want to call it. And this was a hard one for me too, because it's also a distraction sometimes. But for us, in solitude, it means completely silent, quiet, with no noise. Solitude is stillness when we're used to busyness, forcing yourself to just sit still for a minute. I had a lot of conversations with people earlier about some of these topics. I had a lot of people that were like, oh man, I get some great solitude time like when I'm driving. Like that's where it is. Or like I get some great solitude time when I'm riding dirt bikes out in Central Florida. It's great. Like that's my solitude time. That's my place of solitude. Just to clarify, that's not solitude because you're doing something. The purpose of solitude and what Jesus is talking about and what his example is you are literally going to a place where you are isolated and doing nothing. And that's what this one's talking about. Solitude is stillness when we're used to busyness, just being still. Solitude is also going below the surface when we're used to being superficial. Allowing God to penetrate our hearts, call things out in us, listening to what he has to say, and call things out in our hearts and our lives that might be a little uncomfortable. But it's because we know that we're going to grow from these things. And the last one, solitude, is facing who we are when we're used to projecting an image. Listen, you're not hiding anything from God. You might be able to hide it from your family or your friends, but you're not hiding anything from God. When you step before God, he knows exactly what you're walking through. He knows exactly who he created you to be, and he knows exactly the image that you're projecting to the people around you. And in solitude, it's not about that. We need to be facing who we are when we're used to projecting that image, allowing God to say, take off the mask for a minute and just be yourself. And let that insecurity go for a minute. Regardless of how you feel, I created you this way. So be yourself. I want to challenge you to exercise this week. Gordon, this past Tuesday in our staff meeting, he challenged us as a staff to do this week. For the rest of the week, he asked us to go to the adult ed room into a closet that he had put a chair in, and he said, for 10 minutes a day, I want you to find time to go and do nothing. Sit in the presence of God, just be. And I'll be honest, that was hard. And he had us kind of text in some accountability to say, hey, this was our time slot that we were there. And then he asked us to share, what's one word that you kind of took away from that moment? And to be honest, a lot of us were like distracted. That was the word. There's a lot going on here during the week. There's building next door, so it shakes the whole building. There's a lot of distraction that can happen. But I have to tell you, and that was some of the best 10-minute slots that I've had in 2 years. Because it was refueling to our soul. I want to challenge you to do that 3 times this week. Find a closet. Find your car and sit in the parking lot or a random parking lot where there's nobody there and just sit for 10 minutes. No music, no talking, no nothing. Just be. Because honestly, some of us, all we need is time with him. Is to be in his presence. Because honestly, we're looking around for a life jacket and we're like, Lord, I don't know that I can take this anymore. Where are you? What am I supposed to do? And Jesus is standing there with the life jacket saying, hello, I'm right here. I want to be with you. I want you to be in my presence because I know what that does for you. Come here. And this is what he says to you. I love this. Matthew chapter 11. This is what he says. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He doesn't say go sleep. He doesn't say go distract yourself from what you're walking through. He could have picked any other activity, but instead he uses the words, come to me. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. But herein lies the problem. We don't like awkward things. We're afraid to have complete solitude with him because we're thinking, well, what do I do? What do I say? Nothing. Nothing. You do and say nothing. That's the point of solitude. Push through the awkwardness of solitude. And I'll warn you, it will be awkward at first, and that is okay. Gary Thomas, I'm going to wrap up with this, but Gary Thomas, a well-known pastor and author, said it this way. He said, we who have been drugged by diversions cannot expect to enter the quiet without struggle. Our souls will roar for diversion. But if we can just get to that place, solitude is a place where Christ remodels us and renews us in his image. And in solitude, Christ frees us from the compulsions of the world, and he reminds us that you are a chosen child of the King, and nothing can take that from you. So this is what we're going to do. This is going to get a little awkward. For the next 4 minutes, there's not going to be any music. There's going to be no lights on the stage. These lights will be dimmed just a little bit, and we want you to spend time in the presence of God, in solitude. Now, I understand there's other people in the room right now, which is why we're going to dim these lights a little bit, because I believe that if these lights are dim just a minute, you can just kind of get in your zone. You can feel that emotional presence and the real truthful presence of God in this place, in your seat, with you. So let's do this. Let's practice this. You ready? Go.
So what about you, TC3? Do you need to put on those noise-canceling headphones? Has life been coming at you at warp speed? Is the noise of the world drowning out God's voice in your life? Do you feel strangely disconnected from your joy in life and from your purpose and from God and from your relationships? Do you feel alone in a room? Solitude is where you find that connection with God. This world fights against us when it comes to this area, but Psalms 46:10 says it this way: "Be still and know that I am God." So take some time this week, find yourself a quiet space, get alone with God, and be still and know that He is God.
Thank you so much for joining us today here at TC3 Live. We hope that today you connected with the life-changing power of Jesus Christ. We're always trying to do that every time we visit. It's because of you guys that we're able to bring TC3 Live home to you and around the globe. We wouldn't be able to do this without you guys, and we're so grateful for the partnership and trust that you have in us. If you'd like to get behind us and what we do here, just click that Give link above and follow the prompts from there. If you have any questions about anything and all that you've seen today, please take a second and email me, dan@tc3.org, and I would love to connect with you. And hey, don't forget, next Friday night, November 16th at 7 p.m., if you're local, come join us for a night of worship here by the TC3 Live Band. It's going to be such a great event, a night you won't forget. Well, hey, have a great week, God bless, and we'll see you next time.